ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hey there, background briefing listeners. I'm Erin Park, host of the new ABC podcast series Expanse, Nowhere Man. It's 1999 and a young man has deliberately walked into the desert on some sort of a mysterious spiritual quest. He's been missing a month and most people think he's dead, but can an American search team save the day? From cigar-smoking searchers to booty-wearing bloodhounds, this story just keeps getting stranger.
This looks like a cartoon.
Search Expanse on the ABC Listen app.
There's something you might have in the fridge right now. An easy snack that you turn to when you're short on time. You know, it's healthy. You've heard people say it can reverse the signs of ageing. You know it's convenient. You can eat it on the go or slip it into a lunchbox. And you know it plays well with others too. You can have it in a smoothie. You can have it on your cereal. I certainly do. Or on top of your Christmas pavlova. I bet you've guessed it by now. I'm talking about blueberries. But there's one thing about this little berry that you might not know. What happened to it before it arrived in your fridge? I'm Gina McEwen, filling in for Thomas Aridi on Background Briefing. And today's story is reported by Rachel Clayton. Rachel, it's a tasty one you've got for us today.
Hey, Gina. It is a tasty one. It might not be so tasty once we get into it, though.
Okay. I'm interested to hear what this is about. So where does the story start?
It starts in a university lab in the town of Coffs Harbour on the New South Wales north coast.
So now we're going across into the chemical lab.
I'm being guided down a lino hallway through to a small, brightly lit room with 2 workstations.
We've got our blueberry samples here.
Dr. Kirsten Benkendorf is a marine scientist who's testing blueberries she bought from local supermarkets.
We do this work under the fume hood just because of that organic solvent. And that gets transferred into the sample.
It's very much like a high school science experiment. It's quite cool to watch.
And the next step is to give it a good vortex. So this is just going to mix it up really well.
After she's done that, she shows me what is left, basically, and it's kind of this blueberry slurry in a test tube. And there's a really heavy dark part and then a lighter coloured bit and then a little bit lighter on top, sort of broken into these 3 layers. So that separates everything out.
So that's the organic top layer is the one that we're aiming for.
So that light purpley juice-looking colour?
Yeah, all of that solvent at the top.
So this is a marine scientist that you're talking about here. So why is she testing fruit for pesticides?
It's a very good question. Kirsten's always been really interested in the marine environment, so in the health of our oceans and the crustaceans and fish. And one of the first studies she did was looking at oysters because
the oysters do actually seem to bioaccumulate some of the pesticides from the water.
And she wanted to understand where those pesticides might be coming from.
See if they could be traced back to some of the food that we eat.
And oysters are obviously these filter feeders, so the water's running down and they're collecting this, and that's how she discovered it. That's interesting. So what did she actually find when she was testing this purple juice?
Yeah, her results were pretty concerning. So she found that all of the blueberry samples had between 4 and 11 different types of pesticides in them. And among those pesticides was one that really got her attention, and it's called dimethoate. You might have heard of because it made headlines in recent years after the European Union banned it. But here in Australia, it's legal to use it. But for Kirsten,
the main concerning results about dimethoate were that 3 of those batches had concentrations of dimethoate that would exceed the acceptable daily intake for a 20-kilogram child with less than 20 grams.
Okay, I can feel a number of people would be freaking out right now, parents who are thinking about their kids as well. So what does she mean by acceptable daily intake?
It's based on your weight. So it means, say there's an 80-kilo person and they ate over 80 grams of blueberries every day over the course of their life that contained this level of the pesticide dimethoate, they'd be consuming more than the federal regulator says you should be eating without risking your health. And if you're lighter, say you're 70 kilos, you'd hit that daily intake after 70 grams of these berries.
70 grams. That's not a lot. But is that legal? Are those levels legal?
Yeah, they are. So Kirsten's not saying the levels she found exceeded the legal limit. What she is saying is that the current legal limit, which is set with a safety buffer, is not adequate.
Okay, so that's concerning because how can you be sure how much is safe to eat, especially when you eat a lot of blueberries every day?
Yeah, I know. And I eat a lot of blueberries. So after seeing Kirsten's research, I decided to check out how they're produced and decided to go to the place most of our berries come from, and that's in New South Wales. About 86% of blueberry production in Australia happens there. There's been an enormous boom in blueberry production and growers in the northern rivers over the past decade or so. And that's really ramping up right now in a place called the Nambucca Valley. So I got on a plane and I went up there.
Flying time up to Coffs Harbour is 1 hour and 25 minutes. Welcome aboard, enjoy the flight.
And as we approach Coffs Harbour Airport, you're welcomed by this super lush, deep green rolling hill landscape that the plane flies over, and it's many degrees warmer than in Melbourne, so my puffer jacket is definitely not necessary.
The trusty puffer.
I got off the plane, got in the car, and drove to the Nambucca Valley about an hour's drive south of Coffs Harbour. And this whole region used to have a ton of banana production. And when I got off the plane and was driving to my first interview, I drove past this enormous packing warehouse for blueberries. And there were huge trucks coming and going, the car park full of employee cars. And then right across the road, there's this tiny little shack with like bananas hanging from the rafters. And it looked like it had been built like 50 years ago. And it was so small compared to this enormous packing warehouse for blueberries. It really sort of epitomised that transition in this area from bananas to berries. Because 10 years ago, there were no berry farms in the Nambucca Valley. But last year, there were at least 23 berry farms, with the majority being blueberries.
Wow.
It's growing by about 15% a year on average.
That's huge. Why has it grown so much?
One reason is the climate. So northern New South Wales has pretty much the ideal temperature for blueberry growing. And then there's this growing consumer demand, not just in Australia, but around the world for blueberries. We eat a lot more of them than we used to. And then the other reason is, which I found out when I was there, it's really easy to start a blueberry farm. You just need to buy land, and that's it. And then you can buy some blueberry plants and then start growing. There's no specific qualification or application that you need to make. You can just start doing it.
So they're easy to grow, so it's a good business model.
Yeah, and very little red tape if you want to start doing it.
Ah, okay. Interesting. And so you fly in there, you're going to meet someone. Is that what happened after you got in there? You flew over the factories, flew over the fields?
Yeah, that's right.
You got out, and what happened after that?
So I drove through this area that had these huge sprawling blueberry farms on either side of the highway, and I saw tractors spraying a lot of pesticide that created this real mist or haze. And I'm going to show you a video of what that looks like.
Okay, so looking at a field and it's looking over a valley, it looks like a really lush valley. There's hills in the background, very green. And you can see that there's lots and lots of nets. And you're right, there's like this mist kind of rising up from the nets into the air.
You could be forgiven if you drove past that for thinking that it's water vapour, but you can't use a lot of water when you're spraying blueberries because you just get rot in the plants. So the majority of that spray is a chemical. And spray drift is meant to be controlled. You're not supposed to, as a farmer, you're not supposed to spray in a way that means it's going to fly over to the neighbouring property. And I heard about one neighbour who lives next to another blueberry farm, so not the one I just showed you in that video, a different one. And she's had concerns about this for a while. And her name is Raywin Mackey. And she lives with her partner Marcel and this beautiful dog called Tui. And I wasn't sure how well my visit actually was going to go because when I arrived, I kind of bumped the dog with my car. Oh my God.
Don't worry about it.
Oh my God. No. I didn't see her.
No, don't worry about it.
Oh, Mommy, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. She'll be all
right.
over in a minute.
Good start, hitting the dog.
I take it you must be Rachel.
Yes.
This is Tui.
Hi, Tui. Hi. But they're actually pretty forgiving about that, and Raywin takes me on a tour of her property, which is in the Nambucca Valley Shire. And as we're walking, she points to a neighbouring farm.
I'm not sure if it's 40 hectares or 40 acres, but it's a bucket load.
I looked it up. It's about 18 hectares, and it's been there for a couple of years now.
Right, okay. And so is Raywin the neighbour? Is she saying she's concerned about the amount of spraying?
Yeah.
And what does she describe? Like, what does she say about it?
Well, she says...
It depends on which way the wind is blowing, obviously. But it concerns me because they seem to spray endlessly.
And is this kind of spraying legal? Is that, like, what do authorities say about this?
Spraying pesticide is legal. You are allowed to use pesticides in this country. Everyone over the world uses pesticides to grow our food. They're a bit of a necessity these days. But there are rules around how you use them. And if anyone's concerned about how they're being used, they can call the Environment Protection Authority, so the EPA, to investigate. But it's not actually as easy as you'd think. And Raywin tells me about one particular day when she tried to do that.
The spray was going everywhere. It was lunchtime, so I rang EPA, and the guy there says to me, "There is no farm at that address." And I said, "Yes, there is. We can smell the spray. That means it's coming on our property." He wanted me to come outside and take a look. And I said, "No, I've just told you that the spray is coming here. We can smell it. I am not going outside to take photographs. It's less than 100 metres away." He didn't actually believe there was a farm there.
This one right here?
Yeah, because it's not even on Google Maps yet.
How did they not know the farm was there?
It's actually really difficult to find out where these farms are. So on Google Maps right now, that farm still isn't showing up. And even the local council doesn't know how many berry farms are in their council area. The stats that they ended up giving me were from last year, and they couldn't include any sort of breakdown of which type of fruit or vegetable was being grown. They didn't know where, and they didn't know how much land was being used for that berry production.
That doesn't sound right. Like, if you're starting a business, you'd think that you'd meant to register and say, "I'm starting a business here and I am growing, XYZ. So that's not the case. I could just go and set up a berry farm and not even need to register it anywhere?
I mean, you'd have to register your business number, but you don't have to sort of seek approval to plant, 100 blueberry plants in the 18 hectares of land you've just bought. You can just start doing it.
That sounds bizarre to me. So when you were there with Raywin, did you see them do any spraying, or did you see any other spraying happening while you were there?
I didn't see any spraying that day, but I came back a few days later and there was spraying going on the farm. And I really wanted to find out what was being used. So I drove up to the farm gate to see if someone would rock up. And when I parked at the gate, I heard the spraying stop. And apart from the occasional car, all I could really hear for a while was cows and dogs on this neighbouring farm. And then from quite far away, I hear this quad bike getting closer and closer. And out of nowhere, the farm manager popped up on this quad bike. And sort of asked what I wanted, and I introduced myself and said, "Could I have a chat with you about the concerns that your neighbours have got about the pesticide you're using?" And he said, "No, I'd have to talk with the owner who wasn't there."
Okay. I've left a letter to the owner in the mailbox, and it's got all my contact information.
A couple of weeks later, I did speak to the owner on the phone, and he told me he's always followed the rules and even installed a weather station after being advised by SafeWork to do so. So he only sprays when the wind and air pressure are at the right levels. And there's no suggestion the berries Kirsten tested came from this farm. Later, the EPA got back to me and said it was aware of concerns about pesticide use on that particular property, but that no action had been taken because there wasn't enough evidence of non-compliance.
Okay. So you know that there are pesticides being used on this farm, this particular farm. Do you know what kind?
No. So there are 8,000 different chemicals allowed to be used in Australia, and he told me he only uses ones that are approved.
8,000 chemicals.
And Kirsten, that's our marine biologist, she says that that's actually why she believes her tests underestimate the amount of pesticide that was on her berry samples, because when you test for this kind of thing, you can't test for 8,000 different chemicals. You have to pick the pesticides you want to search for. And the more you pick, the more you want to search for, the more expensive it is. So Kirsten tested for 157 pesticides and it cost her about $6,000.
$6,000 for 157 of this 8,000.
Yeah, I know. I was really shocked about how expensive it was.
Yeah, wow.
But this lab always tests for a certain number of chemicals that are banned in Australia. And that's how something called thiametin was picked up by Kirsten's tests.
Thiametin. Okay, what's that?
It's an insecticide, so it basically means it's used to control bugs and insects, and it's a chemical that's not allowed to be used in Australia. And in Kirsten's initial testing, she found thiametin in a high concentration in one of her samples, and then in her follow-up tests, she found it at lower levels in 6 of the 11 blueberry samples she tested.
Okay.
And it was deregistered in 2001 in Australia because of its toxicity.
Deregistered?
Yeah. It means that no one is allowed to use it in Australia and it's not sold here. And the Australian Blueberry Growers Association has actually told me there are cheaper alternatives available anyway, and they really don't think people are using it on their farms.
So Kirsten, this is our marine biologist who's doing the testing. Now she's saying 6 out of the 11 blueberry samples had this banned chemical. That's quite a lot. Could there have been cross-contamination or something occurring in the lab? Is there a reason for this?
Well, Kirsten told me that because the thiametin was picked up in most of the samples, but not all of them, it's an indication that it's not cross-contamination. And she also did solvent and blank extracts.
That extract is then sent to the laboratory as well for testing. And, you hope to get nothing in it. And yes.
That came up blank. So it was ruled out as being a cross-contamination issue. And she also went back to the lab and talked to the analyst to make sure. She just really wanted to double check before she went further with her results that this is correct.
I was really wanting to have it absolutely clear that I was calculating the concentrations correctly based on the information that they'd given me, and they basically alleviated all of my concerns.
And Gina, there's one more thing in Kirsten's results. Thiametin, that banned insecticide, was also picked up in an organic blueberry sample.
Really?
Yeah, it was strange, right? Because you don't expect to find pesticide, let alone a banned pesticide, on organic products. And again, it just made me wonder, where could this banned pesticide have possibly come from? So to find out, I had a quick chat with a horticultural agronomist called Mark Percival. He's been living and working in the region for about 30 years. And during that time, he's consulted for dozens of farmers and he's taught a course at TAFE on horticultural chemical use for 5 years. So a great expert to ask about this. And so I went and asked if it means there could be cross-contamination in packing facilities. And he said,
it's much more likely to be either groundwater contamination or spray drift. Sometimes it can go 50, 60 kilometres. And if we are finding things that are happening on organic crops, which are regularly looked at, it's probably spray drift.
And to be clear, there's no suggestion here that organic blueberry farmers are doing anything wrong, which means it's possible someone is using a product that contains thiametin.
Well, that's concerning. So Kirsten's got these results. What does she do then?
She tells me she didn't conduct these tests for some sort of gotcha moment to get the industry. But what she really wanted was to create some sort of change in the system.
I guess our results have really highlighted a number of serious limitations, I think, in the regulations.
So she took it to her local council and presented her preliminary findings late last year. There's a really good recording of Kirsten in this council meeting talking about this quite passionately.
I tested some blueberries that I bought from the supermarket.
She shows the councillors a presentation of her findings.
All of those ones that are highlighted in purple are actually seriously hazardous to human health, including this compound here, thiametin, which is actually not registered for use in Australia.
And you can really hear her speaking quite fast, because if you've ever been to a council meeting in Australia, you know there are very strict time limits on presenting. But interestingly, when she gets to the end of the 5-minute limit, quite a few councillors want her to keep going.
Thank you, Professor. I'm sorry, the 5 minutes are up. I'm going to move her. A bit of quiet from the gallery or I'll clear the room.
Mr Mayor, this is a very
I beg your pardon?
interesting and informative conversation. I move that we extend it, please.
Thank you, Councillor Genvy.
I'll second that, please.
Thank you.
And then when she's finished, one councillor says,
This is just the most fascinating talk. I've been a macadamia farmer. I know those banned chemicals. We would be at industry days. The industry body would say, well, this has been banned overseas, but we've got another 10 years to use. So it was some fantastic thing. And I will remind people that it was the macadamia industry up on the north coast that bred a two-headed fish.
She's referring to this 2009 event where deformities in fish were found in Noosa, and pesticide runoff was blamed for that.
Okay, so what happens next?
This is actually where the blueberry industry steps into the picture.
Okay.
After Kirsten has announced and talked about her findings to the council meeting, the chief executive of Berries Australia, which is a huge industry group in Australia that represents the berry industry, her name's Rachel McKenzie, and she emails Kirsten to ask about her results. And Kirsten's pretty happy with this.
I expressed an interest in working with her and the industry to trace the source of thiamet and try and work out where the problem was.
They exchanged a few emails about the results, and 2 days after these email exchanges, Rachel McKenzie presents at council about blueberry farming, the positives for the state, the amount of money it's bringing in. And she's about to wrap up when she brings up Kirsten's findings.
I must confess I was a little alarmed when I listened to one of the speakers from the last council meeting, Professor Kirsten Birkendorf, who said that she found toxic chemicals on some berries that she tested. So I rang her and I said, goodness me, have you got the batch number? Can you tell us where it came from? And she said, oh no, I didn't keep that. And I was like, well, surely if you thought you were poisoning people, you'd let people know because we've got full traceability. We could have actually identified where it came from. She said, oh, no, I don't have the container anymore. And then the chemical that she actually said that she found has not been available in Australia for 40 years.
She's undercutting the findings.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like that. And Kirsten is a bit miffed by it.
I guess I was kind of surprised that she would question my credentials, considering I'm a professor. I've got over 160 publications in peer-reviewed scientific journals, and I was quite open about the data and actually wanting to investigate, properly.
I followed it up with Rachel McKenzie and discovered that despite downplaying Kirsten's findings at that council meeting, she did follow it up by tracking down the grower whose berries had thiametin on them. So as she said before, because Kirsten didn't have the punnets from the blueberry she tested anymore, those batch numbers were lost. But Kirsten remembered the brand of the berries, and so she passed that along to Rachel McKenzie, who told me she could use that information to identify who grew those berries.
It was their brand, and they were like, we're up to date with our testing. We never used anything like that. We haven't even heard of it.
But she wouldn't tell me who that grower was. Rachel McKenzie also organised tests to be done of 14 blueberry samples from New South Wales supermarkets after I'd called her. And she said the testing found no thiametin in any of those batches.
Okay, so what about Kirsten's other findings? Did you ask about those results as well?
Yeah, I did. I also asked about the other concerning finding about dimethoate that we talked about at the beginning.
Yes.
And so Rachel tells me, look, it's used for pests. We have to use it if we want to send our blueberries to South Australia. We have to use dimethoate.
Dimethoate is from a pest management perspective, it's very effective with fruit fly, which is one of our biggest pests.
And that's very true. Fruit fly is a big problem in Queensland and New South Wales, and states like South Australia don't want it. And Rachel isn't too concerned.
Multiple levels of concentration high, like just so much higher, so that there is absolutely, even if a child ate 3 kilos of blueberries in a sitting, that they would meet that critical threshold. That's the globally recognised way that this is managed.
So Rachel thinks our berries are safe and she thinks our pesticide limits are okay, right?
Yeah, but Kirsten disagrees with that. And when I pushed Rachel McKenzie on this, she said there's somewhere else Kirsten needs to take her results if she's so worried.
The EPA is the regulator. Has she raised it with the EPA?
So did she take it to the EPA?
Kirsten did, yeah, because she wanted more help investigating the presence of this banned pesticide.
I guess I've been a little bit frustrated that neither the Food Authority or the EPA sort of followed up to offer any help investigating it further, because pesticide testing is expensive and I can't just go out and, I've funded all of this research personally.
So she's paying for all this testing herself. Is anyone else doing this kind of testing on a larger scale?
It is actually pretty complicated, especially when it gets to the testing. So I really delved into this area, and what I discovered and didn't expect to find is that food meant for export is the most regularly tested, so not the food that is sold at our supermarkets that Australians eat.
So the food going to other countries, going offshore?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So in the case of berries, that would be the berries we're exporting. So how about the berries that we're growing and eating in Australia? Are these getting tested regularly?
Well, the last time blueberries were tested by the federal regulator, which is called Food Standards, was in 2008.
Really? So why 2008?
They just don't regularly test. It's a patchwork system. There's a lot of gaps. And they even told me that when it came to raspberries and strawberries and grapes, those had never been tested.
So not even in 2008, they'd never been tested at all?
Yeah, well, that's what they told me, that their records show those fruits have never been tested.
But the industry tests it too, right?
It does, but it's done by private companies and it's not compulsory. So we don't know how often it's done or what the results are.
Right. And when testing happens and reveals there a problem, what happens then?
To the EPA's credit, it is trying to crack down on those who do the wrong thing when it comes to pesticide use across all kinds of food. They said that over the past 2.5 years, the EPA has prosecuted 21 pesticide-related incidents in the courts. And that's due to things like poor record keeping, so not knowing what you're using, and not using pesticides properly.
You'd think there should be a simpler way. So why isn't there a simpler way to do this kind of testing?
There was a simpler way to do this. So back in 2013, the then Labor government realised that there needed to be a federal testing program for pesticide on food that we eat domestically. And they introduced this pilot program called the National Produce Monitoring System. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it was to address this gap in existing monitoring of the food that we buy and we eat in Australia.
Okay, so what happened to that testing?
Didn't last very long. So a year later, the coalition won government and axed that program. And Labor was really concerned, and the Shadow Agriculture Minister, Joel Fitzgibbon, told Parliament that this was a really bad time to be axing a monitoring system for our food.
Consumers are entitled to know that the system is not letting them down, and the chemical residues in the food they're buying at the market are not so high as to pose a threat to their health and safety. So I call upon the government to rethink this very, very silly idea.
So it was axed. What replaced it?
Nothing replaced it.
With that program that you were talking about that Labor brought in, did that program actually work at the time?
The results were never made public at the time, but 3 years ago, they were made public via a Freedom of Information request. And the results actually, they perhaps show why the government, the coalition at the time, didn't want to make them public. It was the first year of a pilot program, so it had only looked at a couple of foods so far. They hadn't had a lot of time, but it had tested stone fruit and strawberries. But it found that of the strawberries, they tested 103 strawberries, 14% had pesticide residue over the maximum limit.
Wow, that's a lot.
And one sample had almost 90 times the limit.
90 times?
And it wasn't just one pesticide they found over the limit, it was 7.
Multiple.
And one more thing, the pesticide most frequently detected in non-compliant samples was dimethoate. So the same chemical we've been talking about since the beginning that Kirsten found at high levels.
Right. So what you're saying is Australia had a national testing regime for about a year and it found pesticide levels showing up on fruit were too high. So why was it axed?
At the time, back in 2014, Barnaby Joyce was the Agriculture Minister, and he told Parliament it was being axed as a savings measure. And we also know that the National Farmers Federation was lobbying for the scheme to be cut because they were worried farmers might end up picking up the tab for it one day, and they didn't trust the results. But there is a little bit of hope here because I asked the Berries Australia Chief Executive Rachel McKenzie about that particular program.
I was at my previous organisation, Queensland Fruit and Vegetables, and ironically, we actually lobbied to keep that program.
So she actually wanted that scheme to continue.
I'd much rather have a system that manages that information and that it's run by the government and that we don't have people who are mollusk researchers feeling that they can, that they feel that they have trust in the system.
She's taking a swipe at Kirsten there, but she goes on.
I actually think that a robust, science-based system around chemical use is so vital to our industry because it's really important that the consumers trust our product. I felt that it was a retrograde step.
And she would support the government bringing it back.
Okay, but is it going to happen anytime soon?
It doesn't seem like it, but there is one regulator shifting into gear. So a couple of weeks into this investigation, I went to the APVMA, that's the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicine Authority, and they're in charge of approving which chemicals are allowed into the country. And after I spoke to them, they quietly put something on their website saying that they're considering a ban of dimethoate on blueberries, raspberries and blackberries. And they said they're considering that because Australians are eating significantly more berries than they used to. And I pushed them on significantly and found out they mean our intake has gone up by up to 962% for some age groups.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a really big jump because they haven't updated their data on how many berries we actually eat for 30 years.
30 years. Okay, so why does it matter that we're now eating so many more berries?
It matters because at the moment, and as I said before, it's perfectly legal for these farmers to use dimethoate at the levels detected by Kirsten. But the problem is that that's based on this assumption that we're eating way fewer berries than we do. So basically, we're eating more berries, so we're therefore eating more pesticide. So the limit for how much residue can be on each punnet needs to be lower.
Sounds like it should have been lowered a long time ago.
Yeah.
Background Briefing sound producers are Ingrid Wagner and Zoe May. Theme composition this week also by Zoe May. Sound engineering by Simon Branthwaite. Fact-checking by Imogen Tyndale. Rollout producer and additional fact-checking by Ben Sveen. The supervising producer is Max Chalmers. The executive producer is Fanu Filali. The reporter on this story is Rachel Clayton. And I'm Gina McEwen. You can subscribe to Background Briefing on the ABC Listen app. Thanks for listening.